background, I commenced in local government in Kyogle Shire in 1963.
Yeah.
I left Kyogle Shire, and as I was a junior there, and I went to Broken Hill in 1965 as the assistant treasurer. I left Broken Hill in 1973. I was married in 69, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
1973, and went to Barraba Shire as a deputy shire clerk. I ended there in 2000, and I was there for 1973. I left there in 73 to go as the assistant treasurer at Lismore City Council. I became the treasurer at Lismore City Council from 86 to 92, and left at that time. A lot of councils in New South Wales were having trouble with their public liability, and we did it as joint between member councils, a group of councils run by RJ Abrahams, and I was the chairperson of a group based in Lismore and involving Casino, Kyogle and adjoining councils with, and I would like to talk about the public liability situation later on.
Yep.
I left there as to come into Queensland, and as a Queensland manager of this public liability group, to set up different groups in Queensland. In the meantime, RJ Abrahams had invited Greg Hallam to New South Wales with Ian Leckenby to have a look at the systems that were set up in New South Wales between councils, because Queensland had realised just what the savings were to do joint arrangements with public liability. As a result of that, they offered me a position to set up the group or groups in Queensland, which I came to Queensland, and after 2 years with RJ Abrahams in Queensland, Greg Hallam agreed to involve the whole state rather than just individual groups of councils, and they went out to tender for it, and Jardines were offered the tender for the joint public liability, and as a result I was out of a job. I then was for 4 to 5 years I owned a hotel in Tweed Heads, and which wasn't a very successful operation, but at the same time I was also working with some of the local government groups and especially coming into Queensland. I went to Woorabinda. I was asked to go to Woorabinda for a period of time to recover a lot of housing debts in the vicinity at that time was $3 million, and I was there for a period of roughly 12 months, a tough 12 months. And I came back into local government at that stage and relieved at Eidsvoll Shire for a short period, as Mundubbera Shire was advertising for a council CEO, and I was offered the position there, in which I was 7 years I think 7 years at Mundubbera Shire. And upon leaving, I was offered a position at Aramac Shire, and in which I took up, and that was in the early 90s, 92, 93, with the view that the amalgamations were coming on, and at that time was the three that were involved there was Aramac, Barcaldine and Jericho. I was, after the three CEOs from those councils were involved in being putting in for the job as the temporary CEO, in which I was appointed to the position with the disappointment from the Barcaldine Shire Council. After the initial period of time with the amalgamations and the time afterwards, the 3 months afterwards in arranging for the employment of a new CEO, I then after Barcaldine I came back. Oh, that's right. I was offered a position with as I'd been the CEO in an amalgamation here out there. The CEO at Gundawindi Regional Council contacted me to see if I'd be interested in coming to Inglewood. They were having trouble in amalgamation situation with Inglewood and Texas, and because that was the three, Gundawindi, Inglewood and Texas, at that stage, in which I accepted, and I spent some years in Inglewood, and on retiring, inverted commas, I was asked to go out to Boulia to take a position there as the CEO, as CEO at the time out there was retiring. He didn't tell me that. Initially I was going to be there for 3 months, and spent nearly 2 years there. A very good 2 years, excellent 2 years. There's a lot of stories you can tell about that, because when I went there, they'd called for a position of CEO out there, but all the applications were from engineers and people from overseas, no locals. But anyway, I took the position and extended it for the further 12 months after the initial period, and we appointed initially, and then a lady, Lynn Moore, who is still the CEO out at Boulia Shire. I then came back to Inglewood and retired in 2014, I think, 2014-15.
Yep.
So there's quite a few of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of change there too, Ian. So
absolutely,
going from place to place, you must like that challenge and you must like the change.
I like the change, and I like the western areas.
Yep.
In particular. Obviously, Lismore was a very big challenge, and a CEO being the city treasurer there, because that was a time where they changed from their main administration down the street, where they had an office, main administration office, an engineering office, and a health surveying office, because they were initially three councils, all there, with the headquarters in Lismore, Nimbin and those places, and it was a very big shift to shift 5 kilometres to a new building away from the main drag of Lismore, and that was a very challenging time there, and the CEO at that time was new as well, and that was a big change, as you said, and going out to the western areas, as I said, in the amalgamation in '95, I had prior to leaving Kyogle, I had a meeting, or we had a meeting with the 6 councils that eventually were amalgamated, and actually we had a meeting in Mount Morgan, and I said at that stage I wouldn't be surprised that if the 6 councils would come together, in which the mayors from 2 of the councils absolutely slated me something terrible, because they didn't want their little nest egg,
of course,
changed, and and I was because we'd done a lot of joint arrangements with garbage and health surveyors and planners and things as joint arrangements, and it was very easy to in my mind, for those 6 councils to amalgamate, but because they weren't big dollars and cents. But anyway, certainly some changes, and going back out into the western area, out to Aramac, well, it was a big change for me to go from sort of comfort of the coastal areas, and to go out there, it was a long way.
But you were willing to take that challenge.
I was willing to take that, and did it. I thought pretty well for the period of time I was there. So.
And all the councils you went to seemed to be going through their own changes at the time when you went there. Well, how did you deal with that, I guess?
Getting to know the people that in most of the places, at that stage, Scott Mead had done a lot of work with a lot of the councils in developing their future arrangements and that, and his group were very good. I got on very well with Scott, and I kept a lot of his books and that he had on the amalgamation, and what information that they provided for each of the councils. Yes, there was a lot of change, and I found politically it was a difficult situation for me to be involved.
Your professional background, financial or?
Well, financial, but I didn't finish my accountancy, although that I have done a lot of it, and I never actually finished and got a CEO's clerk certificate. That was always it was interesting on the point of view of one of the reasons I took the position as the Queensland manager of the public liability for RJ Abrahams. The local government acts were very different between New South Wales and Queensland. They're now virtually the same.
Mm-hmm.
At that stage, you had to be qualified to get a job as a CEO in New South Wales, but you didn't have to in Queensland.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that's why when it came time, when I was Jardine said, cheerio Ian, I then could apply for a CEO's position in Queensland,
Yeah.
in which I did. And that's where I started at Mundubbera Shire.
Mm-hmm. What do you think were the biggest changes you saw in your time in local government?
Well, obviously, from my point of view, is the dollars and cents saved with public liability. And I don't know if you understand what the situation was back in the early years. What happened in America? They had a problem with someone died in a swimming pool because they hit their head and drowned.
Yeah.
That caused an enormous problem with public liability and the cost involved. And so each council used to go out and get their own public liability rights, and it got to a ridiculous situation. RJ Abrahams realised what the situation was. They then were a small company. They then realised the value of going to England getting the best price to do A, B, C councils as a combined one, and then we used to manage the first layer. So we buy probably 200 million in public liability, but then the group as a council would look after the first, well, depending upon the size of your group, up to say 5 million or 10 million, and so all the trips and slips and that, and footpaths and things like that, we used to cater and pay that ourselves, and then you'd just buy a layer above that to the 200 million. So that was the big thing in the change that I saw as far as councils, because when I came into Queensland and I sent a letter out to to all the councils about possible changes and that with regarding grouping of councils, and I found certain councils with public liability or with say $50,000.
Right.
When in fact I could offer them $200,000.
Yeah.
And you know, if someone tripped on a footpath, that 50,000 would go nowhere.
And then they're exposed.
They're exposed. Absolutely. And I think that when I contacted my boss, I just couldn't believe that I was getting this information back from councils with virtually no public liability here in Queensland whatsoever, because all the councils wanted to do was to say, righto, they've got public liability. They didn't worry about the level. So
it's a massive change in
it was a very big change for councils, but a very positive change too, because
very much so.
And you know, you'll get a positive outcome, but before, no, it was, as I said, I just couldn't believe that the level of cover that the councils in Queensland had. Was how I got into local government. Well, that's easy. I got into. I actually finished my leaving certificate, and I met up with at Mullumbimby, the principal at Mullumbimby High. He was a good mate of my father's, who was a school teacher, And he said to me, if I had a son, I'd look at him getting into local government. To me, local government.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because all my family a lot of my family were ex-teachers and still are. But I wasn't keen to be a teacher. What do you enjoy doing now? Taking it easy. No, not really. I enjoy being involved with the church.
Yeah, so you do that to keep yourself busy.
Yeah.
Obviously, CEO roles are not just 9 to 5. Yeah,
absolutely not.
You're always on it. You're always thinking about things. You're always getting prepared for meetings. So,
my role model at that stage was the principal at I suppose Lismore City Council. The CEO at that stage had been there for 25, 30 years, and the deputy was the same. And they, to me, were my role models at that stage. As CEO, what worked for you? Well, to me, my years in Mundubbera were the best years of my life. 7 years odd there, and I felt that in developing situations there, built a library, and did a lot of development around changing things there, and the development of the art gallery in Mundubbera was a big thing. So over a period of time, we saw a lot of development of the assets and that within Mundubbera that had been lacking for a long time. What did you have to change about yourself? Listen to people. I think the biggest thing I've always been a problem with, being able to remember people's names, and that's always been a problem for me. I carry a little book with me, and that's something that I did have to change. One of the things and I go back to Mundubbera, was my contract was a 3 year, and then 12 months extension.
Yep.
And council, it does depend a lot on the CEO's position, does depend upon those 6 or 8 or 10 people around there, and being able to sort of involve them. And when it comes time to put your hand up, are you going to be appointed again for another 3 years? It's a very sort of worrying time, especially from a family point of view.
Yep.
And what was the difficult part of your role? Well, I think councillors are the most difficult, being able to meld all the councillors. Just thinking about having I'd say from a local government career, being a CEO is a very unnerving time, because in a lot of cases you are on contracts.
Yep.
And more than being an employee. I think the first contract was in Mundubbera that I had. Prior to that was you were on a day-by-day basis, I think that's the hardest thing. You try in your general sort of operation, you try to be helpful for the whole society, and it's easy for you to make one mistake and it costs you your contract. Yeah.
So what is the advice to prospective CEOs in local government?
Be able to, well, as I keep saying, being able to listen to groups, and be strong enough to discuss things with your mayor very closely, because they have a lot more power these days than they used to have. and if you don't get on with your mayor, your job won't be there for long. As far as I'm concerned, and you just have to be mindful of your society. One of the things I used to always make myself available around the place of a weekend. I used to go for a drive out the roads in your whole area. I've been one to sort of know exactly what every road's like, so that when they sit around a table and they mention a pothole or something that's not right, you know what they're talking about.
You understand it.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's an important thing. I don't know. That's about the lot that I've got, Marshall. It's been a long innings, a very varied innings.